Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. All right, so last month for November, we did back to basics and we started with straight wires. We created a bezel frame and then we created a bale and brought the wires down for design. This month, I'm going to turn that completely upside down. We're going to start with the same banded wires, but this time we're going to start with the bale. We'll create the bale and then we'll come down to bezel the stone and then bring the wires up into design. So I have 4 pieces of 20 gauge round copper wire, and you could use square if you want, it works with both, and I have them cut to 13 inches each. My rock, by the way, thank you to one of our very own members who sent me a beautiful selection of rocks. This is a lovely little dragon agate, I think. Dragon vein agate, I think is what they call it. Either way, I love it if I'm not calling it the right thing. But anyway, it's about 1.5 inches long and about 3/4 inch wide. So 13 inches of wire will suit you. And I'm just going to center my wires off right here to this ruler and get to about 5 inches. So I've just centered 13 inches, and right here at about 5 inches I'm going to put a piece of tape. I've pre-straightened these wires, and in previous videos we know how to straighten our wires with the nylon jaws. We bring them all together and band one at the end here and then one at your 5 inches. Leave the other side open so that we can weave. Okay, so about like that. Doesn't need to be exact. And I want you to come up about 1 inch. I'll just get this to the edge of the tape here. So 5 inches right here. And then make a little mark at 6 inches. So 1 inch over. So basically that inch is in the center of your wire. All right. And then right in the middle of that inch, mark off about 1/4 of an inch. All right. As we work, we're going to separate these 2 by 2. So take your wires and just kind of fan them out, 1 to the left, 2 to the left and 2 to the right, just like that right here at your mark. And the gap between here is probably about a total of 1/2 inch at that, 1/4 of an inch on the inside diameter of that center mark. So the center mark, the inside diameter is about, the inside width here is about 1/4 of an inch. And these are, fairly even as I spread them out here at the Y. I made a Y out of them. Hopefully you can see that. All right, so you can just do this with your fingers, or you can, use a nylon jaw to grip it right here. If this helps you, you'll put your nylon jaw, just right there so that the last mark is showing. Oh, grip pretty tight. And then just bend them back this way. Kind of have that. And then on this side the same. I'll just grip real tight here so that my last mark is at the edge, and I'll just create a little diamond shape. I'll bring the 2 marks at the end together, and they should be aligned with the center. Okay, that should be approximate center, just like that. And then at these 2 marks I'm going to turn the wires back to vertical. So you can, I find it's easier just to hold it right here with my fingers, real tight at that mark, and just turn both of them back up to vertical. Okay, so put your finger right there at that mark. Just do a soft bend back to vertical, just like that. You don't have to worry, they don't have to be super exact. We'll jiggle them back. So your wire should look about kind of diamond shaped like that. Okay. We're going to weave these wires together as though these two pair are one. So we'll treat them as one. Okay? You can see that, I'm fairly centered down here in my wires. All right, so now I'm going to get, I think we better have 3 feet to make sure we don't run out. So get your 28 gauge weaving wire and cut 3 feet for this 1-inch bale. Don't worry, 3 feet's not a super huge amount, but it'll make sure that we make this distance, because what we don't want to do is run out of wire midway. You hate to leave a cut in the middle of this weave. So I'll cut my 3 feet, and I'll just let my weaving wire drape down the side of me, just like some yarn would. And I'm going to change my camera here so that you can see a little better. All right, so I'm going to insert about a leading inch of my weaving wire. And we just ran our fingers over the weaving wire to make sure there were no kinks or anything in it. And I'm going to just do one complete coil. I'm going to treat these two as though they're one. And actually it would be a little bit easier for you if we taped 2 of them together up here. So I'll just get a little tiny piece of tape. You don't need anything huge and cumbersome. Just get tiny little pieces of tape. Okay, make sure that these wires are side by side. And if they're round, they might turn on you a little bit, but it's okay. And then just tape them together, just so that when you weave through them, you don't have them separating on you all the time. Just a little trick I do. All right, so we've got 1 coil to anchor our wire right here. So I'll make 1 more coil. I'll go over 1 more time, and then we'll go under. Okay, so it was a complete 360 on the first loop, then a half, and then dive into the space between and go under. This is going to be a figure 8 that we're going to do and work up this bale. So with your wire on the opposite pair underneath your finger here, bring it back over your frame wires, down through the center, make a complete 360 around both of those frame wires, then come back into the center and come under the opposite frame wire. Go a complete 360 around this pair, then back over the top, through the middle, and under the other side. Okay? When you set your wires up like this from the beginning, it's a little easier to keep the space as you work. So your concentration is on keeping these coils up against each other and not overlapping the previous one. And then also when we start to make, wider, we start to make progress up this frame and the weave gets wider, the other goal you're trying to do is make this stretch nice and even with no bubbles. Okay, so we'll always just kind of, I keep this weave underneath the pad of my finger with always this kind of downward pressure as I'm weaving. When you go from what I call the narrows into the wide spaces, it's quite an easy weave. When you go from the wide space back down into the narrows, this entire weave wants to slip forward. So it's going to be real important for you to, keep this nice backward kind of tension as we pass this midsection and go back from wide to narrow. And you'll start to see that. All right, so I'm on the opposite side of my wire. I've got a nice stretch of tension. I'm going to come over the pair, dive in between. I'm going to make my complete 360 around that pair. Come back over and in between, then go under. It's real important in this weave that you make a complete 360 around these frame wires. If you just go back and forth like a figure eight, the entire thing will slip out. It'll just slip. So that's why this 360. I'm only doing one 360 around each frame pair because I want this weave to be nice and tight in these open stretches as it gets out. If you want more space in between the weave, then you do 2 or 3 or 4 coils around each frame wire before you pass through the middle. Okay, so let's get back to the pattern. I'm going to do a 360. We'll just call this on the upper frame wire, and then I'll come above it, control the tension, come between them, come below the lower pair, do a complete 360 around those pair, come above it, dive into the middle, and cross to the opposite side, do a complete 360, come back to the top, dive into the middle, and pass to the opposite side. After, a few passes, I like to just use my finger nail and push them back so that they're nice and neat. You're keeping these frame wires side by side as you're working. Okay? So complete 360 around this pair. And you see the finger underneath is doing a very important job. It's holding backward tension on this entire weave. It might, for those of you that have trouble here, it might be hard on this left hand, or on the holding hand, I should say. So just take your time, give yourself breaks as you weave. And you don't want to pull so tight that you crush these two into each other. Keep these frame wires side by side so that the stretch is consistent and even in the way we want it as you work. That pre-bend is really important to make that nice stretch in the middle happen. And by pre-bend, I mean exactly this. I'm laying the wire coil down next to the previous one, and then I'm inserting the wire in between and coming across. I'm bending up to get that pre-bend on that coil, and then I'm diving into the middle, and I'm placing that coil where I want it. I'm going to do my 1.5 here, come back to the middle. So do you see what I mean by placing the coil? And as you get into the wider stretches, you might have to put your little thumb, over it to help hold it down while you dive into the center. Always checking your tension to make sure that it's nice and even and no bubbles on the back side. Okay? And then I'm just going to push these back with my fingers carefully. And then I'm going to take my nylon jaw, because this is a beautiful, delicate weave. And I'm just going to give a little gentle tapping right there to settle those wires. I'm keeping all the rest of the frame wires nice and straight while I'm working. Okay, I'm not crushing these up while I'm holding. And every now and again when I do this, just going to jiggle my fingers to make sure this hand doesn't cramp up from the holding. So I've got the tension right here, and then the backward pull on my lower index finger to keep the weave in place as I approach the wider spaces. And again, treat it a little bit like knitting. If you knit, you know, turn the frame to get closer to you to help you make it. I'm trying to stay in the camera, so this arm is uncomfortably stiff in this direction. Normally I would be like this as I weave. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate that. I'll back the camera out a little bit. Just, it'll go out of focus, but you can see me weave. Okay, so and I would dive into here, use my fingernail and push things back. It's a patient weave. It's not something you do quickly because each coil, each pass across this open space will want to slip away. And you'll especially feel that coming after we hit the center. Okay, so you'll just work patiently like this back and forth till you reach the center. And I'll just bring the camera close again so you can see me. I'm going to reposition myself too because I'm not comfortable. Okay. I'll keep weaving. And holding each of these coils back. My frame wires stay side by side on each side. There's lots of different ways to do this Bale weave. I'm trying to give a little bit of, I want the newbie to be able to do this without too much difficulty too. This will be beautiful and elegant, nice and tightly knit. But it's fairly easy to get. You just have to be real patient. This is not a tight pull. It's a very deliberate tension. It's not, you know, that I'm pulling this tight. I'm just keeping a very steady tension on the wire. And I'm putting it, locking it into place in a sense with that single coil that you do. Okay. So again, as you get into the wider spaces, I'm crawling my thumb up the weave to help hold it into place as I work here. So I'll do one loop here and then I'll use my nylon jaw, give everything a push back. Told you 3 feet of wire, and I'm actually starting to worry about it because I'm not sure. Well, we might make it. If I tell you something like 4 feet in a note, you'll know what happened. And, you know, some people do real cutie stuff with a bale like this. They'll embed beads and a weave like this, or they might, you know, overlay a gemstone onto a bale. And this bale can be made, you know, the traditional frame where we bezel first and bale after. You know, you just spread the wires out just like we did instead of keeping them straight and banding them together. And you weave them. But this is a new frame, and I'm showing you this for a few different reasons, which you will come to see as we move through this month. It's a little bit later than I was hoping for, but everything's recorded, and that's the beauty of that. And if you have to continue wire, you can. It just gets a little messy to, you know, chop this wire in half here in the middle, because this is where your chain's going to ride. So I don't like to have small cuts living anywhere on this bale. And here's where you're going to start to feel it slip. You don't notice it so much yet, but we're about to cross this center. And it's getting, you'll see it's a little harder to keep the wire. Did I do 360? Yeah. So the trick here is the harder you pull, the more it's going to want to slip once it passes that center bump. So the objective is to keep the tension nice and even and straight and neat, but not pull so hard that you fight that slip all the way down from wide back to narrow. So like I said, it's really more of a controlled laying of the wire rather than a pulling to get that distance across this the widest part of this bale. You see, with each one I'm going to start to tap it with my fingernail. Oh, I went onto the previous coil. You see, I let go of the pressure underneath and that coil just leapt forward like a little leprechaun there. So again, just a real even pull across there, but not so hard a pull that you start doing that. You're always pushing back and holding back with your the lower pad of your finger, the pad of your lower finger. I'm talking and not paying attention. So it looks real easy, and it is, but it's not in some places so easy to keep a nice, beautiful weave. It requires a lot of patience. You'll start to see me. And this hand gets quite fatigued, and you have to be careful that you don't crush up all these, all that wire while you focus up here. And it's going to be almost at every single coil on your way back into the narrows that you'll have to control to get a nice even weave. And I'm not giving very much tension because the harder I pull on this wire, again, the more it wants to slip into the narrows like runaway water. Don't get frustrated with yourself when you do this. Just remember that everybody struggles with the same thing, and work each one patiently. Some ladies are pro at this and they go very fast. Not me, and not today. I have to take my time to get this weave right. So I'm working at real speed here and not camera speed. But I will say it's beautiful and it's worth it. It's worth it to make every one of these coils look nice. The flip side is if you do this a little bit sloppy Joe, it looks sloppy Joe. You know, it's one of the most exposed weaves, so real hard to hide sloppy Joe on this one. You know, if you let them slip, then you have gaps and they're seen. Not much you can do to hide that. So I just work. Once we get back into the narrows, like we start to approach this neck, it'll become a lot easier. It'll become a lot easier. We're almost there. And we're going to make it with 3 feet of wire, with 3 feet of weaving wire here. Okay, I'm going to cross this and then I'm going to tap them. Push each one down. And hold it down while you cross the midsection and get the other one landed. Okay, that's the only way they go neat. Little tap tap, little light tap tap. Double check all your frame down here. Keep it pretty. Keep it straight and neat. There's a lot of groovy things you do with this Bale first design, or with what I do with this anyway. I'll show you several things. This first one, we're, going to bezel this stone. And this stone is a cabochon. So I'll show you how to use this frame with the cabochon. But then, for you newer folks, or just those who have nice focal beads, this is another great frame for doing focal bead sets. There's some very quick things you can do that are super cute with this frame. And you don't have to weave this Bale either. I could have just left them 4 straight bare wires and just flipped them over to make a Bale. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. I'm getting there, you guys. And hopefully you're getting to the edge of back to your narrows. And you're probably faster than me right now too, because I am under the camera too, even though I would be working slow. And I'm just almost there. Stay patient, land each coil. Don't let these get, sloppy just because we're almost there. Then your hand is fatigued. Push them all back. This is when my patience starts to go, I can leave a little gap, I can leave gap. It's going to be in the back. But I don't. I stay disciplined to my weave. And we're going to make it nicely with this 3 feet of wire that we started with. So right about here, it should start to get comfortable again for you. You'll see why this is worth it in just another couple minutes. I'm going to go all the way to my mark, and so should you. I just jumped that coil. Undo that. It gets a little bit, well, I'm under the camera, but you want to make sure that you just keep nice tension here when the weaving wire gets short and you get to these ends. See how that coil wants to be the other direction. Just use your fingernail, set each one of them until you put these 2 halves back together. And I'm probably 4 coils away from that. Away from making my mark here, and you'll just weave till you get to your marks. When it gets short, you just, stick the end in there. Okay. Stick the end in there. I'm still trying to pull them back and keeping them together, because that's why I choose to do only 1 coil between them, because then it looks like that, and that's beautiful. Okay, the more coils you do in between each pass, then of course the more space you have in between each of these. And while it's pretty, it's just your preference. With that more open one, like I said, we could have slipped tiny beads in between each one, but I like this look right here. Okay, so when you make your mark, just make sure that you end, we're not going to have much left, maybe just an inch or 2. We might have to add wire. So this whole thing was for exactly the weaving. Hopefully you made the distance with yours. Okay, so I'm going to do one last wrap to get a little closer to my mark. And then we'll add a wire when we put the next together. Or when you do it, you can add, 3.5 feet and have extra down here. So I don't have any extra right here. So rather than ending on 2 coils, 2 frame wires, because this can unravel in here on 2, I'm going to just make, 1 loop. I'm going to take my tape off. Just slides off. All right. So make sure your wires are nice and straight. We've got a nice pretty weave. This is the front. This is the back. Where I started is the front. Where I ended is the back. I can cut this leading guy off as well. Well, let's take the tape off. And we'll go ahead and cut this little guy off. And we'll take this tape off as well for now so that I can secure this little wire. Whoop, I just bent up my stuff. It's okay. Just fix it. Alright, I took all the tape off and then I cut the leading tail and just gave it a couple of wraps around the single frame wire right there. Tap it all down, and this is what you got. Alright, and my wires are nice and straight. Alright, so now that we have our our bale weaved up, that's real pretty. I've released some of the tape here. You can keep the tape on if you want. It might make this bend over the dowel a little easier for you. So my weave's nice and neat. I'll just use my bale making pliers, but you can use anything. A dowel, you know, a little piece of wood like I keep talking about that I get at the hardware store. You can use a big pen, but you want to get, you know, maybe a 3mm inside diameter here. And I'm just going to hold this, you know, over this part of my plier at its widest point here. And my bale's a little larger than the plier, so I'm just going to brace it. And I'm just going to turn the bale over itself and bring these two wire halves together so that my weaves meet. Just nice and neat, just like that. And you'll just use your fingers and kind of snuggle the sides up together. Just like that. Okay. And right now, that looks really good. This was the front of my weave, so it looks slightly better than the back. You might have that too. My wires are coming down on each other, 4 side by side on top of 4 side by side. Okay, and this should be a pretty stiff bend. So this sets you up to do a lot of things. Either use cabochon, use beads, or even make this just into a bale component, which we might do sometime in the future too. But today we'll wrap this cabochon with it. Alright, so once we've folded our bale wires over, you've got 4 wires on top of 4 wires here. I've not tied these two halves together yet because we still need to split these up. So facing one side here, you're just going to identify and kind of pull out the 2 wires from the side, okay? And you'll do the same on this opposite side. Just identify and kind of pull out a little bit the 2 wires from the side, one from the back, one from the front. Just like that. And then do the other 2. So from the back, pull over one to the left, one to the right. I say back and front, but there really isn't yet. Okay, and then go to the other. And same thing, you can separate one to the right and one to the left. Okay, just like that. These bale wires should be fairly close. And so in logical order, let me change the camera focus here a little bit so you can get a little closer. So I've got these 2 from the bale coming to the left and from the front and the back, so 2 pairs. So 4 on each side, just like that, nice and neat. Okay. So I'm going to take a plier. I want these to sit side by side, just like my banded bezel wires. So I've got these sloped at about, you know, maybe 45 degree. And I'll just take a plier and do a real light pinch right here just to get them flat together, just like that. Go to this side and do the same. Get them nice and neat side by side. Just do a little pinch right there so that they stay together a little better. Okay, so we're like this now. So you can choose whichever side of this weave is, you know, the prettier side, and make that the front of your bale. Okay. So now we're going to band these wires together. So let's go ahead, and now that we have them separated, and put another spot of tape on them. I don't like big tape, so I just take a little bit. And from the bale, just come down about 2 inches. Keep your wires side by side and neat, just like that. Over here too, from the bale, just come down a couple inches. Put a little spot of tape there so that it keeps them nice and neat for us, just like that. My stone is fairly deep as far as the length goes. See there? My stone is fairly deep. So I have to band a little bit up here and up here, and I probably would do myself a favor to band a little bit on the bottom as well. You can weave these wires to create a side bezel, or you can just band them. In our case, we're going to band them. So just like in our Back to Basics month, we'll take about 6 inches of 22 gauge half round wire. You could also just use your 28 gauge if you want to. And I'm just going to run my fingers over it, get the warps out, and get the flat side inside the little bend here like this. Okay? And I'm looking at my bale. This is the front, I think. No, this one. It's the prettier side of my bale. So I'll take my half round, and I'll just take it right up here to the neck. You can hold this little 1-inch fragment so it doesn't travel on you. It's a little bit squirrely, but make 5 nice neat wraps. The tension should be straight across all 4 wires, but not so tight that you crush them. Okay, so you want to keep them 4 side by side just like that. The first one might be a little weird, but after that the bands should be pretty comfortable to make. So just make 5 of them. There I have 4, then I'll make 5. I'll take this first one, the leading tail, just get that first loop tight and neat. You can take some small metal pliers and just tap that right there, tap it right there. We'll lift these and we'll make our cuts on the inside of this frame. Just tap it down, don't crush it. Just get it as close to this neck as you can get. Okay, just like that. Nice, neat bands. Okay, so we'll take another 5 or 6 inches of half round, turn it under, and we'll do 5 wraps on this side. Make sure that the 5 are on the outside. So 1, I'm all over the camera here. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Tap these flat. Pull that first and last coil. Snip, That's it. Nice and neat on the inside there. Just make sure they're sitting about even on both sides. And depending on how long your stone is, you kind of want to band also, you know, about right here, about the bottom third, maybe the bottom quarter. So you just can eyeball, you know, an approximate length on your frame. And I'll get another 6 inches of 22 gauge half round. And we can slide these, so before we, you know, tap them too tight. So you just get to the approximate place where you think your stone, the size of your stone, needs these bands. If your stone is small, you might not need these. Mine is 1.5 inches tall, so it's pretty decent stretch down the side of the stone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm not gonna, so, you know, the tension's nice, but I'm not gonna crush them so that I can still slide them. All right? So cut these off in here. And I'll just do a real light tap so that I can still slide them, but it'll hold. Okay, so I can still move them. And then the same on the other side. We'll just straighten out this half round. You only need about a few inches. And I'll eyeball the approximate distance and make 5 wraps. And I'll cut them off on the inside here. Just give a real light tap. So all 4 of my wires are still side by side, and I haven't crushed them in on each other. So now I'm just going to get, see if I can get this a little closer so you can see. I'm just going to make sure that the bands up here are nice. I'm going to make sure that the front of my bale that I want is showing. And I'm going to make sure that my center line, that I can follow my center line either with my eyes, or if I need to use a pen and trace my stone, I can do that as well. If I can find my pen, holy cow. Here we go. So a little trick I do sometimes, and it's, you know, I would be on grid paper, or I would be on my cry cut board. So just to make a rough circle there. And when you get situated, you know, just follow the line down the center and kind of make an approximation here. Okay? And that's about where you want your wires to come together. So you can do this, you know, up in the air with your hands, or you can do this on the table. I've shown this on the table before in your previous videos from last month. So I'm going to show you how I do this in my hands. I tape the stone to my finger so that I don't fear losing it. Put a little spot of tape on it. And basically I just make a little cradle. I'm going to get it deep into my fingers here. Got the tapey finger, you know, the tape on one of my fingers here to help hold it. Okay. I'm going to hold everything in place. And I'm just going to shape these wires around my stone carefully here. Make sure that your stone stays center. I'll just make this curve. Don't worry about those side bands right now. Just make sure that they're up on the stone, up above the curve. Use the side of your stone. Ooh, mine's a little slippery. If it's slippery for you in your hands, you can put it back down on the table. And I'll do that actually because my stone is quite slippery. Okay, and right there where your center line is, just take and do an outward turn. Then just shape the other side around the bottom of your stone here. And when you get to that center curve, that center line, do the same thing. Just turn your bands down. Okay, so just like that. It's pretty good. And now we can actually, set these sides right here. So I like them a little lower on the body. I'm going to actually bring them all the way down here to these curves. You can do that just by sliding them with your fingers. Just work patiently, just like that. Okay. And I'll just use my fingers and smooth out the wires there a little bit. So I've got a nice hold and a nice frame. Right? So down here now, where your wires come together, obviously we're going to band all 8 of these wires together down here. Just give a little tap to my half rounds when I get them in place. That's a nice frame. Okay, so we'll get another 6 inches of half round wire. Right now there's no front or back other than my preference for which side of my weave is better. So, but I'm about to, we bent around the stone, so this is the top of my frame. My stone's pretty symmetrical, so I have to always be aware of which side I bent. Okay, so these bands are held together. I'm just going to take this half round and make 3 nice side-by-side loops or wraps all the way around all 8 of those wires down there at the bottom, just like that. Tap them together once they're all sitting nice and square. And you can either cut the half round off, or sometimes I leave it on in case I might need it. Get these tight. As you work, these are going to want to slide, so I leave these long because when they're short, they tend to let out a little bit more. So you'll just always be mindful of these wraps and keep them right up against there, okay? Once we make these first bends, it'll stay. So let's separate our wires, take our tape off, just by tearing it right here. Okay. Now we're going to seat our stone. So I'm going to reposition this over my rock, and I'm going to pick it up. The first thing I'm going to do is make a back seat. You should be familiar with this frame now. It's very back to basics, and then this lower portion of it should look like side rails to you, right? Isn't that neat? Then you learn this new Bale as well. So anyway, I'm going to go to my back, and just like in traditional frame, I'm going to take my pliers right up against the wraps. You can see that. Let me refocus here so that we can see. Okay, that's much better. I'm going to put my finger in this hole to keep my nice, elegant curves. right here, and I'm just going to turn inward. The wire extended is going to want to pop out, and that's okay. Get this a little bit deeper, just like that. And then you'll do the same on this side. Put your finger in there, get on this last wire, make sure your wraps are right up against the intersection, and just turn. Make them look as similar as you can. Okay. And then come up here to the top bands. Make sure that they're seated all the way at the top of your frame. Grab the very edge of the wire against the bands. Put your finger in this hole and just turn. Okay. It's going to make this little seat. And then we'll do the same to the other side. And turn, just like that. So now you have a cute little seat. I'll just shift things a little bit, it's okay. You have a cute little seat in the back of the frame for your stone. Take this tape off. And just work the stone carefully back into place. And then with your fingers or by laying it down on the table, you can settle the stone back in there, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's pull the side wires forward onto the edge of the stone a little bit. Separate them from the back wire a little bit. Same with this side. Carefully work these wires solidly up onto the edge of the stone. Okay. If your stone is really deep, remember that we could have right here taken our pliers and pulled these wires this way to give, you know, some girth, some space for girth back there. That looks pretty neat. And always while I'm working, I'm checking these wires down here to make sure that they stay neat. These bands stay neatly together. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same on the front here. I'm going to pull these wires up onto the stone. And you can do design if you want to. Or you can just do like what we did to the back, which is what I'm going to do. Just stick my finger in there. I'll lift that round wire slightly. I'm going to carefully nudge my plier in there. Oh, don't do that. Nick it. I didn't, but a little bit. Try to get this where you can see it. Okay, like that, so you can comfortably get your plier on it. Careful not to scratch your stone. Hold this side down and turn, only the bottom. Okay, just like that, so that it comes nicely onto the edge, shoulder of your stone here, just like that. Okay. You can separate these two a little bit just by sticking your finger in there. Make sure it stays on the side. And then do this bottom one over here. Separate that guy from the pack enough to get your plier in there. Get your plier carefully in there. I usually stick my thumbnail straight in there. You don't need to bend it, you just need to separate it. I'm going to get my plier right on the edge of my bands, put my thumb there to hold my curve, and gently turn the wire onto my stone. I'm going to check to see that those two are fairly even. Check my profiles to make sure that they're fairly similar. That looks really nice. And the stone can still pop out the top here, so you kind of gotta either do the same with the top, or we have to add a wire or something here to hold this in. And we can put a pin here if you want to. You know, all of that works, but for now, what we're going to do is just turn these in just like the bottom and keep it real clean. I've got nice design on this stone, nice pattern, so I don't want a lot of busy pattern with the wire. Okay, so I'll just trace my thumb all the way up here separate the wire a little bit, and that might be all that you need to do. I'm going to turn it in. Just get your plier right in there. Hold all the body of the wire so that this turns. Just make a slight turn onto the edge of the stone, and that's nice and clean. Okay. Same with this side. Just lift your wire slightly. Get right on the edge of your bands. Just work patiently. Grip it. Hold the body of the wire and just turn slightly inward, just like you did the other side. And that's it. You caught that stone now. And there's, that's it. It's solidly in there. Now we can all take a breath. And the rest of it is all design. So obviously from, you should be familiar from the side rails pendant that you can take all of these wires from the bottom and turn up, into the sides and top of the pendant for design. I'm just going to make some adjustments back here to get a little more even. And then with these right here, if you decide you don't need them, and we won't, we'll go ahead and just cut them off. Get them, both the ends, nice and tight. Make sure your wires are sitting nice and squarely together, 4 on 4. Then just make the little snips right here, cinch them down with the plier. And then we're going to flip all these up and cover all that, so it won't be a bother. All right, pretty good so far.